My name is Hance Ellington. I'm the assistant professor of wildlife ecology here at the center. Ryver over there is a master's student in my lab. And today we're going to talk about wild pigs. And so wild pigs is an umbrella term for any pig that occurs outside of a fence here in Florida. And so some other terms that you might have heard before or used for wild pigs: wild hog, feral hog, wild boar, feral swine, tiny woods rooter. All of these terms all mean wild pig. So they're all wild pig, and wild pigs are any pig outside of a fence in Florida. Now, wild pigs are the feral version of our domestic swine, right? So domestic swine, we use this for all of our pork products, right? Domestic swine are domesticated versions of wild boars that originally are native to Europe and Asia and North Africa. But it only takes a generation or two from a domestic swine living outdoors and free to begin displaying more of the progenitor or the wild boar traits. So furrier, hairier, elongated snout, more tusk development, bolder and aggressive or more aggressive animal. So very quickly, once a domestic swine, pink pig, outside of a fence for a few generations will start looking like that. So it doesn't take very long. So wild pigs first arrived in Florida from the Spanish. So the Spanish, right here, Spain, right? They had domestic swine on their boats when they came to North America in the 1500s. And they left pigs on the Gulf Coast of Florida because they thought, well, we need a good food source for when we come back in a year or two that we're familiar with and is going to be easy to catch. Well, it turns out they didn't necessarily catch them all. And so that was the first time that wild pigs were introduced to North America. Now, since then, there's been lots of introductions of wild pigs, intentional and unintentional, throughout North America. And so now pigs occur all over the US, Canada, Mexico. Pigs also occur in South America, South Africa, Australia, and Southeast Asia and Oceania. All of those areas, the pigs are not native to. So what are wild pigs? Well, wild pigs, like I said, are our feral versions of our domestic pigs. They're sexually dimorphic. That means that males and females look different. Males are much bigger, or can be much bigger than females, getting up to the 250-pound range, sometimes even bigger if certain things happen to those pigs. But the adult females can be as small as 75 pounds. Now, we think that there's over 500,000 pigs in Florida, and that's a conservative estimate. There's probably many more pigs in Florida than that. In the wild, wild pigs can live about 10 years in the wild and before they die of natural causes, but a lot of pigs in Florida die before that for various reasons. Now, the other sort of interesting facts about pigs is they're what we call diet generalists. That means they eat about anything. They'll eat plant material, they eat animal material. So we've seen pigs eating turkey nest and quail nest. We've seen them eating sea turtle nest on the coast. They do have some foods that they really like. They really like acorns in the fall. They really like roots and tubers in the spring. But they can eat about anything, which lets them, allows them to live about anywhere. But they do have one limitation, and that is they get really, really hot. So they're not very good at thermoregulation. Do you know anyone know what thermoregulation for humans is? How do we cool our bodies?
Sweat.
Shade, yeah. Yeah, so that's external how we can do it, but we have sweat, right. That's our internal mechanism. That's thermoregulation. So we sweat, produce water on the surface of our skin. That evaporates, that process cools our body. Pigs can't do that in the same way we can. So they get really hot, so they need to seek out external ways to cool their body, like shade, but also water. So they'll find water, ephemeral sort of temporary wetland areas that are muddy, and they'll roll around in that and cover their body with the mud, with the water that allows their body to cool down. But that process, it's called wallowing, will destroy this wetland and make it bigger and bigger every time that they're rolling around in that. And the reason that those get so much damage and so big is because wild pigs live in social groups. We call these groups sounders. So these are groups of related females. So these are aunts and sisters adult females and their offspring. No males in this group except the piglets. So it's just the related females and the piglets living in groups called sounders. Now, once the piglets reach sexual maturity, once they're old enough, about 6 months old, if they're males, the adult females will kick them out. Then these bachelor males or young males will live in small groups on the landscape of 2 to 3 pigs, and then the big males, they're called alpha males, will live solitary lives here in Florida. But these sounder groups can sometimes be made up of 20 or more individuals, especially if there's a lot of piglets. Now, the other sort of interesting thing about pigs is that from very few you can get a lot really, really quickly. So pigs can produce their first litter at 6 to 8 months old. And each litter they produce is going to have somewhere between 4 to 7 piglets. And in Florida, because the environment's so nice, it never really gets too cold or too energy stressed, right? There's always food resources. So pigs can actually have 2 litters a year here in Florida. So from one pregnant adult wild pig, if you assume that all of their piglets that it produces in the first year reproduce as well, you can quickly go from 1 pig to hundreds of pigs in less than 2 years because they have such a high reproductive rate. And wild pigs are considered an invasive animal here in Florida. Does anyone know any other examples of invasive animals or plants here in Florida? Yeah? Sir? Oh, okay, yeah.
Brazilian pepper.
Brazilian pepper, yeah.
Burmese python.
Yeah.
Certain grasshoppers, especially the black ones that have the yellow lines on it.
Yeah.
I don't know the name of it.
I don't either, but I know what you're talking about. I'm a terrestrial vertebrate wildlife ecologist.
Iguanas.
Iguanas, there, great.
South
Yeah,
Florida.
Yep.
and a tiny lizard.
Alligators are not invasive.
Yeah. They are native.
Those are native Florida.
Poison ivy.
Poison ivy is also native plant. All right, so there are a few things that make a species, plant or animal, invasive, and these are the criteria they have to meet to be considered an invasive species. 1, they have to be non-native to Florida. That means they're not from Florida. So a tiger is non-native to Florida. They have to be introduced by humans, either intentionally or unintentionally. So coyotes 100 years ago would have been considered non-native to Florida, but coyotes were native to North America right in the Mississippi River about 100, 120 years ago, started expanding the population naturally. This wasn't human caused, wasn't human introductions. It was a natural range expansion, and so now coyotes are here in Florida. So coyotes weren't introduced by humans, but they were non-native. Now they're native. They introduced themselves. The third important criteria is it causes harm. So what can that harm come in different forms? It can come in the form of economic harm, so damage to agriculture, environmental harm, damage to native wildlife or different environmental features like water and soil, or causes harm to human health through disease spread and things like that. And so pigs check a lot of these sort of boxes off, right? So they eat about anything. They're going to target easy food sources. So they go after crops. Crops are easy energy, high energy food sources, so they can create a lot of crop damage. That's directly translated into economic damage. They have that rooting behavior, right? So they use their snout, this long snout, and they'll go and they'll push that snout into the soil, and what they're trying to do is turn the soil up to eat those roots and tubers. And when they do that in a pasture, that's destroying all this pasture. And that loss of pasture, especially when it's multiplied across large rangeland areas, can result in a direct reduction in calf pounds per acre in production. So another economic impact. They have environmental impacts. So when pigs are doing that rooting behavior, right, they're upturning the soil. That's releasing soil carbon to the air, so you're having more CO2 released than would have naturally occurred. That disturbed soil is not retaining the nutrients in the same way as an undisturbed soil would. So things like nitrogen and phosphorus that can be bad in high concentrations in our water flow more easily across disturbed soil. So when wild pigs are present, those things reach higher quantities or rates in the water. Now the other thing, when they're creating these sort of wallows, they're lounging in that most of the day. So they're also defecating in those waters. And these waters, these ephemeral and temporary wetlands, are connected to our larger groundwater and water stream network. And what we've seen is that from all that extra pig poop, we have higher E. coli concentrations in our water. So we have lots of environmental impacts at that scale. Pigs also compete against our native wildlife. Pigs are more aggressive and live in larger social groups than deer and turkey. And they will push deer and turkey off of the high quality food areas, so food plots. They'll quickly destroy, prevent deer and turkey from using them. They will outcompete even squirrels under highly productive oak stands, sometimes to such a degree that oak trees don't regenerate. So do you know how oak trees regenerate and why? And what role squirrels play? Does anyone know?
They bury the seeds.
Yeah. Squirrels don't consume every acorn that they eat. They bury some, they cache them. Sometimes they don't remember where those acorns are buried. Those acorns go into oak trees. Pigs consume every acorn they eat. And so if they're consuming enough acorns, we actually see lower oak tree recruitment in some of these high pig density areas. When they do that rooting damage, these are often in temporary wetlands. These are really important landscapes for frog breeding, for tadpoles. But when they get destroyed like this, we see a reduction in amphibians, and we see a destruction of water quality as well. And then the final thing is disease transmission. So wild pigs here in Florida harbor a lot of diseases that are dangerous to our native wildlife, to our livestock, and to us. So things like brucellosis, leptospirosis, pseudo-rabies. The rates that wild pigs harbor these diseases in Florida hovers around 10 to 20%, depending on this, the particular disease. And a lot of those diseases can transmit through water. So here pigs using this livestock water trowel to cool their bodies, to drink water. If these pigs have any of those diseases, sometimes they're just carriers and not actually impacted by them, they could leave the disease, the virus, the bacteria in this water that is then picked up by cattle that come by and drink it later, or native wildlife as well. So lots of potential ways to have that negative impact, that causing harm criteria. Pigs are considered one of the worst vertebrate invasive animals here in Florida and in the United States. So the next thing I sort of want to spend a little bit talking about is that there's a conservation ethic, right? That you want to be a good steward of your land. And for me, there's a couple of key points about being a good steward for your land. You want to provide habitat for wildlife, so providing habitat for turkey, quail, or just general the rangeland birds if you went on the bird tour. There's certain things you can do and techniques that you can do that increase the bird diversity of the landscape. You also want to take care of your water, especially here in Florida, and that not only is rural landscapes, but also urban landscapes, stormwater runoff, things like that. An important component of being a good steward is taking care of the water here in Florida. And finally, we want to manage and reduce invasive species, because invasive species are having all these major impacts on the landscape. They're degrading the quality of our landscape, and they're costing us economic and potentially sources of disease transmission. So for pigs, the way we can do that is reduce the number of pigs. Now, over 500,000 pigs in Florida, we're never going to remove them all because there's simply too many and they multiply too fast. We don't have methods that can remove them all. But we do have methods that can reduce the damage, reduce the population density, so some of these damages don't occur or occur much less frequently. And one of the ways that we do that is whole sounder trapping. And so the goal of whole sounder trapping is to remove the entire sounder at once. And we do that for two reasons. One, it's more effective than removing one pig a night through using other methods. But two, if you remove a pig, one pig out of that group, the other pigs in that group probably witnessed it or saw what happened that got that pig removed, and they're going to be harder to remove in the future. So it's much more effective to remove them all at once. That way you're not educating pigs to your methods. And so we use things like this pig brig trap, the net-based trap, to try to focus in and take out that whole sounder at once. And the pig brig trap uses the pig's own innate behavior to help it be successful. So inside this trap is going to be corn or other bait, so dry corn, fermented corn sometimes, some other bait attractants that you could use. pigs are going to want to get in there. And the way that they're going to do that is they're going to start rooting. They're going to do that rooting behavior with their snout. And they're going to use their snout to push up and under this net. And you can see that the net will come up on that stake. So the pigs can root under. But as soon as they're passed through that net, it's going to fall back down. Now the pigs, there's a long skirt inside this net. So when they want to go out of the net, they're going to walk on top of that skirt and run into the net here. And they're now stuck in this. Not in the net, but inside the trap. Because they don't root back out. Because they they can't understand that that long skirt is their way out. Because here it has this sort of concave approach. And out there, it doesn't have a long skirt. How are we doing for time?
Like 5 minutes left, I think.
Okay, all right. So I'll leave it that because I wanted to show you a little bit about how this net works, but I couldn't really bring pigs here to show you how it works with pigs. So I've got, huh? Well, yeah, you could. But I got some remote control trucks that we can play with.
Cool.
In the remote control trucks in the trap and try to get the remote control trucks out of the trap. Yeah.
Question for you. So if one of them goes in, do the others go in as well with
Yes.
them to save him, or what?
No, so there's a lot of food in here. Big pile
okay,
of
this
food,
was-
right? And there's a whole process where you're trying to acclimatize the pig to the site. So you might start baiting this site before you even put the trap up and have a camera there watching. Once you get pigs coming in regularly, you put up the trap, but you keep it in an open position so that they can come and go, but they feel this net on their back. So that makes them less scared of the net when they feel it for the first time. Again, you're watching. And so with the camera, with a trail camera, you can count the number of pigs in that sounder. And so once you see on your trail camera that all the pigs in that sounder are coming inside the net when it's in the open position, then the next night you lower it. Now you always want to keep bait in there, so every night you're going to be baiting. But once it's lowered, these pigs will come in throughout the night. Often there'll be multiple pigs in here foraging, eating the bait, and more pigs are just coming in. They don't really start to try to get out till it comes almost morning time or till humans approach. Then they start freaking out, trying to get out. And it's too late then. So.
Last question. Can
Yep.
these guys be eaten at all, or no?
So, I mean, obviously, if you're hunting a wild pig, lots of hunters eat what they kill. You can. You want to be aware of those diseases, and there are certain ways that you can prepare the meat or cook the meat that reduces the risk of you contracting those diseases if that pig had that. So, it's risky. You can do it, but there's not really a lot of commercial operation focused on taking pigs from whole sounder trapping and commercializing that meat.
Okay.
Because you can do it, but there's certain permits required, lots of rules to follow because there is danger. So, all right, does anyone want to do remote control cars?
You want to try getting it out of the trap? See if it'll go under?
Uh-oh.